Turning 75 should have been a celebration, but as I sat at the head of the dining room table watching my family enjoy the expensive catered dinner I'd secretly paid for, I felt more like I was attending my own funeral. The irony wasn't lost on me. They were eating food bought with my money while planning to dispose of me like unwanted furniture. "This cake is amazing, Mom," my son Brian said, cutting himself a second slice. "Where did you get it?" My daughter-in-law Sandra smiled smugly. "I ordered it from that fancy French bakery downtown. Cost $300, but nothing's too good for family." She shot me a pointed look. "Of course, we're hoping Margaret can start contributing more to these kinds of expenses soon." I nodded quietly, playing my role as the grateful, financially dependent mother. Sandra had no idea that I'd anonymously paid for every aspect of this party: the catered dinner, the expensive cake, even the flowers decorating the table. To her, I was just a burden living on a meager social security check. The dining room was filled with extended family, Brian's siblings, their spouses, grandchildren, and a few family friends. Everyone seemed to be having a wonderful time, laughing and chatting while I sat mostly ignored at the head of the table. It was my birthday party, but I felt like a spectator to my own celebration. "Grandma, are you okay?" my youngest granddaughter Emma asked, tugging on my sleeve. "You look sad." Before I could answer, Sandra intercepted. "Grandma's just tired, sweetheart. She gets confused easily at her age." She patted Emma's head condescendingly. "Why don't you go play with your cousins?" I watched Emma skip away, my heart aching. Sandra had been systematically poisoning my relationship with my grandchildren for months, portraying me as a confused old woman who couldn't be trusted with important conversations. My other daughter-in-law, Patricia, chimed in from across the table. "Sandra, you and Brian are saints for taking care of Margaret. I don't know how you manage it." "It's not easy," Sandra replied with theatrical exhaustion. "The constant medical appointments, the confusion, the way she follows me around the house asking the same questions over and over. But we're trying to do the right thing." I bit my tongue, remembering the real conversations we'd had. The medical appointments were actually meetings with my financial advisor and lawyer. The confusion was me asking clarifying questions about their increasingly expensive lifestyle choices. And the following around was me trying to maintain some connection with the son I'd raised alone after his father died. Brian looked uncomfortable but didn't correct his wife's exaggerations. Over the past year, I'd watched him gradually distance himself from me as Sandra complained constantly about my presence in their home. What he didn't know was that their home was actually mine, purchased with my investment portfolio and legally transferred to my name after my husband Robert's death. "Well, we have some good news," Sandra announced, standing up and clinking her wine glass with a fork. "Everyone, can I have your attention please?" The room quieted down, all eyes turning to Sandra. She was practically glowing with excitement, and I felt a cold dread settling in my stomach. "As you all know, Brian and I have been taking care of his mother for the past 10 months. It's been challenging, but we've tried to make the best of it." Sandra paused dramatically. "However, we've realized that Margaret needs more specialized care than we can provide at home." My blood ran cold, but I kept my expression neutral. "So, we found a wonderful assisted living facility called Golden Years Manor. It's specifically designed for people with memory issues and other age-related challenges." Sandra's smile was bright and fake. "We're moving Margaret there next week." The room erupted in applause and murmurs of approval. "Oh, that's wonderful. You've done so much for her. She'll be much happier there." I sat frozen as my entire family celebrated my banishment. Emma looked confused by the adults' enthusiasm, but Patricia was already patting Sandra on the back. "Sandra, you're an angel. I know this must be such a relief." Brian raised his wine glass. "To Sandra, for finding the perfect solution. Mom will get the professional care she needs, and we can finally start the next chapter of our lives." More applause. More congratulations. More discussions about how much better this would be for everyone, meaning how much better it would be for Sandra and Brian to have me gone. Sandra continued her speech, clearly enjoying being the center of attention. "The facility is lovely, 3 meals a day, activities, medical staff on site. Margaret will have everything she needs." She looked at me with mock concern. "Isn't that wonderful, Margaret? You'll have people your own age to talk to, and professionals to help with your medication management. I stood up slowly, and the room gradually quieted. All eyes turned to me, expecting gratitude and acceptance of their generous decision to warehouse me with strangers. Well, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room, this is certainly a surprise. Sandra nodded eagerly. I know it's a lot to process, but trust us, this is what's best for everyone. I smiled. You're absolutely right, Sandra. This is what's best. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder I'd been carrying for weeks, waiting for the right moment. Since we're making announcements about the future, I have one of my own. I opened the folder and pulled out the first document, the deed to the house we were sitting in. I want everyone to see something interesting. Sandra looked confused as I held up the official document. This is the deed to this house. As you can see, it shows the legal owner. I turned it around so everyone could read it clearly. Margaret Elizabeth Thompson. That's me. The room went completely silent. Brian's face went white. Sandra grabbed the deed from my hands, studying it frantically. This can't be right, she stammered. Brian, your name is on the mortgage papers. I pulled out the next document. Actually, Sandra, Brian's name is on a rental agreement. This house has been mine for 3 years. I've been your landlord this entire time. Brian stood up shakily. Mom, what are you saying? I'm saying that while you've been planning to put me in a nursing home next week, you've been living in my house, eating food I pay for, and using utilities I cover. I placed bank statements on the table showing monthly payments from Brian Thompson to Thompson Property Holdings LLC. Every month, you pay rent to my property management company. You've been my tenants for 3 years. Sandra was frantically examining the documents. This is impossible. We have a mortgage. We make payments to the bank. You make rental payments that I deposit and then use to cover the actual mortgage, which is in my name. I smiled at the stunned faces around the table. I've been subsidizing your lifestyle while you plan to abandon me. Patricia spoke first, her voice barely a whisper. Margaret, you own this house. I own this house and 6 others across the state. The rental income generates about $28,000 monthly. I pulled out my phone and showed them my banking app. This is just my checking account. My investment portfolios are managed separately. The room was so quiet you could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Emma was looking back and forth between the adults, sensing the tension but not understanding what was happening. Brian found his voice. Mom, if you have this kind of money, why have you been living like I'm poor? I finished. Because I wanted to see what kind of people my son and his wife really were when they thought I had nothing to offer except need. I looked around the room at my family, people who had just finished applauding my removal from their lives. I wanted to know if you would care for me out of love, or if you only show respect to people with money and power. The answer was now crystal clear. Sandra was still staring at the deed. But why didn't you tell us? Tell you what? That I could afford to take care of myself? That I didn't need your charity? I gathered the documents back into my folder. Sandra, you've spent 10 months complaining about the burden of housing a poor elderly woman. How do you think you would have treated a wealthy landlord? Brian looked devastated. Mom, we didn't mean. Yes, you did, I said firmly. You meant every word. Sandra just announced to our entire family that you're putting me in a nursing home because I'm too much trouble. Everyone applauded. Everyone agreed it was the right thing to do. I looked at each face around the table, family members who had celebrated my banishment moments earlier. Not one person asked if I wanted to go. Not one person suggested alternatives. You all just agreed that disposing of me was the perfect solution. Sandra tried to recover. Margaret, you don't understand. Golden Years Manor is a lovely place. We thought you'd be happier there. Among strangers, away from my family, paying $4,000 a month for a shared room. I shook my head. Sandra, the facility you chose costs $48,000 annually. How exactly was I supposed to afford that on Social Security? The question hung in the air unanswered because, of course, they hadn't cared about the financial logistics. They'd assumed that would somehow become someone else's problem. I'll tell you what's going to happen, I continued. Since you clearly want me out of this house, I'll be moving. But since this is my house, I'll be moving you out too. I placed one final document on the table, a 30-day eviction notice. You have 30 days to find alternative housing. After that, this property will have new tenants, ones who won't spend 10 months planning to abandon their elderly landlord. Brian was reading the eviction notice with growing panic. Mom, you can't do this. We have children. Where will we go? Brian, 30 minutes ago you were planning to send me to live with strangers. I'm sure you can figure something out. Sandra grabbed my arm desperately. Margaret, we can work this out. We were just trying to do what's best for you. I gently removed her hand from my arm. Sandra, what's best for me is living with people who value my presence, not people who celebrate my absence. I looked around the table one more time. Thank you all for coming to my birthday party. And thank you for showing me exactly who you are when you think no one important is watching. As I walked toward the door, Emma ran up to me. Grandma, where are you going? I knelt down and hugged her. I'm going to my new house, sweetheart. It has a big backyard and a swimming pool. You can visit me there anytime your parents allow it. Over her head, I made eye contact with Brian. Your daughter is welcome in my home anytime. I hope someday you will be too, when you remember how to treat your mother with love instead of convenience. The next week, I moved into a beautiful condo that reflected my actual financial status. Some family members reached out to apologize, finally understanding that they'd been manipulated by Sandra's narrative about my supposed neediness. Brian eventually came to see me, alone. We had a long conversation about respect, family loyalty, and the difference between caring for someone and controlling them. It took months, but slowly, we began rebuilding our relationship. He'd learned that love isn't demonstrated by making unilateral decisions about someone's life, it's shown by including them in those decisions with dignity and respect. As for Sandra, she never apologized. Even after losing the house, she maintained that they'd been trying to help me. Some people never learn that treating others as burdens eventually makes them burdens themselves. My 75th birthday had started as a celebration of my removal from the family. It ended as a celebration of my independence and self-worth. The house was mine. The money was mine. And most importantly, my dignity was mine to keep.